In this session, I am going to discuss about mitral stenosis. Mitral valve is not a simple structure having a bicuspid structure that sits between left atrium and left ventricle, but it is a complex three-dimensional functional unit which helps in the unidirectional flow of blood during pumping action of the heart. That means it facilitates left ventricular filling during diastole and effectively seals off the left atrium during ventricular systole. The important functional components of this mitral valve apparatus are the mitral annulus, mitral valve leaflets, the cardiac tendineae, which are attached to the papillary muscles, and the subjacent left ventricular myocardium. In a normal cardiac cycle, about 75% of the left ventricular filling occurs during the early rapid ventricular filling phase, and another 25% occurs during the last stage, that is towards the end of the diastole, due to atrial contraction, that is called as atrial kick or atrial boost. And the normal transvalvular pressure gradient across the mitral valve is 8 to 10 millimeters of mercury. And in an adult, the normal surface area of the mitral valve orifice is about 4 to 6 square centimeters. During the process of mitral stenosis, this valve orifice gradually narrows, and when it reaches around 2 square centimeters, that is a critical stage. We call it as severe mitral stenosis. So at this stage, the transvalvular pressure gradient will reach around 20 to 25 millimeters of mercury, and that is a hemodynamic hallmark of mitral stenosis. We're coming to the etiology of mitral stenosis, as we have discussed during rheumatic fever, rheumatic carditis. It is the most common etiology, contributing to about more than 50% of mitral stenosis. Then comes the congenital mitral stenosis, and to some extent the acute valvulitis that occurs during rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, or infective endocarditis. When they heal, they may end up with mitral stenosis. And this left atrial myxoma sometimes blocks the mitral orifice, and it may have the similar hemodynamic consequences as a mitral stenosis. Coming to the pathophysiology of mitral stenosis, this increased transvalvular pressure gradient, as the valve orifice decreases, so the pressure gradient increases. So it will cause a gradual enlargement of the left atrium, and this pressure is also passively transmitted backwards to the pulmonary veins. So this pressure backs up in the left atrium, so it undergoes enlargement, left atrium, and it is also transmitted backwards to the pulmonary veins, then to the pulmonary capillaries. So this will reduce the lung compliance, and it will result in exertional dyspnea, that is the classical symptom of mitral stenosis. As the pressure builds up in the pulmonary capillaries, it then gets transmitted to the arterial system, that is pulmonary arterioles and pulmonary arteries. So the initial response of the arterial system is vasoconstriction. It is functional. Later on, obliterative organic changes occur. So the end result is development of pulmonary hypertension, which becomes severe in later stages. So this severe pulmonary hypertension will cause right ventricular enlargement with secondary tricuspid regurgitation and pulmonary regurgitation, and ultimately it ends up as right-sided heart failure. The enlarged left atrium, when it crosses about 5 centimeters diameter, then it predisposes to the development of atrial fibrillation. This atrial fibrillation is transient and episodic in the beginning. Later it becomes permanent. The development of atrial fibrillation will have two consequences. One, it takes off the atrial boost or atrial kick, which I mentioned in the earlier slides. So the cardiac output declines and the functional status of the patient worsens. The second consequence is there is no effective atrial contraction, it just cures. So there is stasis of blood and it may lead to development of left atrial thrombi. Now coming to the clinical features, symptoms. So there is a latency of 2 decades, that is the onset of carditis to the development of symptom is around 2 decades, because these hemodynamic changes and the valve changes, they undergo a very gradual progression. So history of rheumatic fever can be elicited in only one third of the cases. The rest of the cases they don't remember anything about joint pains or being taken treatment for rheumatic fever. So the classical symptom is the exertional dyspnea or cough, which progresses as MS, as the degree of MS also increases. So it gradually it is there is a relentless progression, and it leads to the limitation of physical activities, and the patient may end up with orthopnea and paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. So NOHA classification is assigned to the stage, as you know. So the patient has to be classified according to his symptoms. Then easy fatigability, it occurs due to decreased cardiac output, because the LV filling is reduced as well as there is pulmonary hypertension, both contribute to decreased cardiac output, and this may cause easy fatigability. And as I told, once the atrial fibrillation develops, the symptoms worsen rapidly. Hemoptysis is also one of the important symptom. It occurs due to rupture of pulmonary bronchial venous connections. Then the patients with MS are prone for recurrent pulmonary infections, especially during winter months. And they may also develop symptoms due to systemic embolization, like hemiplegia or loss of a limb due to the emboli getting dislodged and entering the systemic circulation. Now coming to the signs. So malar flush, and it is just like a purple discoloration of the cheeks that occurs in severe mitral stenosis. And if you examine the pulse, it will be of low volume because of the low cardiac output, and it will be regularly irregular if there is atrial fibrillation. And you have to look carefully for the peripheral pulses, because absent any peripheral pulse is missing, it may signal that there may be embolization. Then coming to the precardium, the parasternal heave indicates right ventricular enlargement. Similarly, the raised JVP hepatomegaly, and so this right ventricular enlargement with subsequent failure will lead to raised JVP, hepatomegaly, ascites, and pedal edema. Apical impulse is not displayed in pure mitral stenosis. It will be normally located, but it will be having a tapping quality, and a diastolic thrill may be felt in the same area, that is the mitral area. Auscultation. So the important changes occur in the mitral area. Once again, the S1 will be loud, and there may be an opening snap if the valve is pliable, that is, if there is no calcification of the valve, you will hear a opening snap following A2 component of the second heart sound. So the classic murmur, rough rumbling, low pitched, crescendo, decrescendo, mid diastolic murmur with the pre-systolic accentuation is heard best with the bell of the stethoscope in left lateral position. If the patient is in atrial fibrillation, the S1 will be of varying intensity, and the pre-systolic accentuation of the murmur will be lost. So coming to assessing the severity of the mitral stenosis, the A to OS gap is inversely proportional, and duration of the mid-diastolic murmur is directly proportional to the severity of the MS. So the severe pulmonary hypertension, that is on the right side of the heart, that is will cause loud and closely split P2 in the pulmonary area. Rarely we may hear a early diastolic murmur, that is a Gram-Still murmur of pulmonary regurgitation, which is conducted down the left sternal border. And transsystolic functional tricuspid murmur will be heard in the left lower sternal border, which increases on inspiration. That is called as Carvalho's sign. So coming to the investigations, so ECG is the first non-invasive, easily accessible, economic investigation, a cost-effective investigation that is done. So if the patient is in sinus rhythm, you see what is called as P mitral, that is, it indicates left atrial enlargement. It's nothing but biphasic P waves in V1 with negative deflection more than the positive, or it may be broad bifid P waves that are seen in lateral chest leads. So with severe development of severe pulmonary hypertension, there is a right axis deviation and signs of right ventricular hypertrophy, like tall R waves in V1 to V3, that is RS ratio will be more than 1 is seen. And if the patient is in atrial fibrillation, you don't see the P waves, you only see the fibrillatory waves over the baseline. Next investigation that is already is chest X-ray. It shows a straightening of the left cardiac border due to enlargement of the left atrium. Then there will be signs of pulmonary venous congestion. Then the echocardiogram and Doppler, they are very useful, very essential. They give a clear-cut picture about the mitral valve structure. You can also assess the subvalvular, entire mitral valve apparatus can be visualized, and the structure and functional components can be assessed. You can also measure the valve area. You can also do, applying Doppler, you can measure the pressure gradient. That is important hemodynamic hallmark of MS, can be measured across the valve, and you can also measure the pulmonary arterial systolic pressure. So you can also assess left ventricular and right ventricular functions, and if there are any associated valve lesions which are not made out in our clinical examination, can be detected. And left atrial thrombus can also be detected during echocardiogram, especially if you pass that is a lead through the esophagus. It is not this is transthoracic echocardiogram. If you want to visualize the left atrium, you will have to pass, you will have to get a transesophageal echocardiogram, that is called as TEE. Cardiac catheterization is not routinely required. It is not done routinely. So you only in rare cases where there is a discrepancy between the clinical and non-invasive findings, it may be undertaken, and it is useful in ruling out coronary artery disease and also associated lesions such as AS and AR. Now coming to the treatment of mitral stenosis. Asymptomatic patients require no treatment. They should be carefully followed up with at regular intervals with echocardiograms and their functional status assessed. So the symptomatic patients, the medical treatment for the symptomatic patients is salt restriction and oral diuretics. So to control the that is the exertional dyspnea that is present, and if the patient is in atrial fibrillation, you will have to bring down the left ventricular rate. So you use we use digitalis, beta blocker, or calcium channel blocker. Then once again, if the patient is in atrial fibrillation, you will have to start him on coumarin anticoagulants, that's warfarin. And if the atrial fibrillation is of recent onset, it is less than 1 year, and it is not very severe MS, you can attempt cardioversion, either that is bringing to sinus rhythm either pharmacologically or by electric counter shock. Of course, the prior anticoagulation is required at least for 3 weeks. This is the medical. Of course, you cannot forget the penicillin prophylaxis that has to be given once in every 4 weeks. That 1.2 million units of benzathine penicillin to prevent recurrent attacks of rheumatic fever. This is a medical management of mitral stenosis. So, surgical treatment, that is valvotomy, is considered in patients who have severe MS with a valve area less than 1.5 square centimeters and their NOH, their severe functional impairment like NOH class 2 and above, with or without PH and no evidence of left atrial thrombus. So, how it is carried out? It is either done by PMVA, that is percutaneous mitral balloon valvotomy, or you can undertake it surgically. So PMBV is the preferred procedure which can be undertaken in a cath lab. So only those patients who have calcified valves, they may require surgical valvotomy. Then coming to the mitral valve replacement, it is necessary in patients with mitral stenosis and significant MR. That is, if there is a combined lesion, you cannot undertake a valvotomy. And in those patients who have undergone prior procedure, either a PMBV or a surgical valvotomy, if you want to, if the replace or valve, if the valve is not functioning well, then you will have to replace the valve. Thank you.